Today's story starts, as the best ones often do, with someone digging in the ground somewhere they probably shouldn't be, on top of a volcano in Argentina, at 22,000 feet above sea level. And what they found there has been making scientists go very, very quiet ever since. Hello and welcome. This channel exists for one simple reason. Learning a language doesn't have to feel like homework. It can feel like a conversation, like a story someone is telling you at the end of a long day, like something you actually want to listen to. Now you can either grab a coffee, follow along actively, or get comfortable, close your eyes, and just listen. Let the language wash over you. Your brain will do more work than you think, even when you're relaxed. Imagine you're a scientist. You've spent years digging through dirt, studying broken pots, translating half-destroyed texts. You have a PhD. You have calluses on your hands. You have probably a thermos of bad coffee. And then one day, on top of a volcano in Argentina, 22,000 feet above sea level, a place where the air has literally half the oxygen of where you're standing right now, someone calls out. Not in an excited, we found a cool rock way, in a hushed way, in a we need to lower our voices because she might wake up kind of way. Because what they found wasn't a skeleton. It wasn't dust. It wasn't the pile of old fabric you'd expect after 5 centuries underground. It was a girl of around 13 years old, seated, perfectly still, perfectly preserved. Every year, the most beautiful children from across the empire were selected, some as young as 6 or 8 years old. They were brought to Cusco. They lived behind walls with no windows, part nun, part priestess, part sacred object. They prepared ritual offerings for the sun god. They wove sacred textiles. They made sacred food and drink. They were, by definition, completely separated from their families. Forever. And then, at a certain point, their destinies were allocated. Some became the companions of Inca noblemen. Some remained in service to the temples. And a very few, a very select, very honored few, were chosen to be the offering. Not to make an offering, to be it. She didn't go to Mount Lulailaco to pray, she was the prayer. And now we need to understand something that's genuinely hard to process through a modern lens. For the Inca, this was not a tragedy. This was a profound honor. The girl selected was not chosen for being ordinary. She was chosen for her charisma, her calm, her purity, her beauty. She was given a place of higher ceremony before the emperor himself. She was celebrated through towns. She was dressed in the finest clothes ever made. In the Quechua language, the language of the Inca, there is no word for sacrifice. The word is offering. The logic was this: the earth gives you everything: life, food, rain, harvest. What can you give back in gratitude that equals that? Only the most precious thing you have, which for the Inca was the purity of a child. Does that make it easier to understand? Maybe. Does it make it easier to feel? Not really. Because she was still 14. She still walked 1,000 miles. And she still knew, with every step, where she was going. Let's reconstruct her final hours. We're at the summit of Lulailaco. It's before dawn. It is bitterly, fatally cold. The priests are there. They've climbed with her, built a small tomb, prepared everything. First, the alcohol. Chicha is a fermented corn beer. It was the sacred drink of the Inca, used in ceremonies, offered to the gods, consumed in ritual. A chicha cup was found intact in her tomb, and toxicology analysis of her hair and tissues confirmed she had high levels of alcohol in her system. Dr. Andrew Wilson described the effect carefully. The alcohol would have had a sedating effect. Combined with the coca leaves, which she was already regularly consuming, it would have created something close to a dreamlike state, dissociated from her surroundings, calm, perhaps even hallucinating gently. The investigators believe this was deliberate, not cruelty, control, a way of easing her transition, a way of making her peaceful for what came next. Her braids, which are tight, intricate, and clearly very recently woven, were probably done that morning by women who specialized in this while she was being prepared. Red pigment, ritual paint, was on her cheeks. She was dressed in her finest clothes. Her headdress was placed on her head, her coca leaves were tucked into her cheek. And then, at sunrise, timed to the December solstice when the days begin growing longer and the sun returns in force, the ceremony happened. But here's the thing, even with all of this context, Dr. Shepherd still needed to answer the question at the center of everything. How specifically did she die? He ruled out violence, no injuries on her body. He ruled out hypothermia, no markers in her tissues. He ruled out burial alive, no signs of struggle, no damage to her fingers or nails, no disturbed tomb. He ruled out strangulation, no damage to the cartilage of her throat. So what was left? Reinhardt, who was one of the first people to examine her on the mountain, remembered something. The first thing he had to remove from her body when they found her was a thick woolen cloth pulled over her entire head and knotted tightly at the back. He described it simply. Once you have cloth wrapped around your head and in your mouth at 22,000 feet, you're out of breath immediately. At over 22,000 feet, there's already 50% less oxygen in the air than at sea level. She was already heavily sedated, alcohol, coca, altitude. In that state, at that altitude, it wouldn't take much. A cloth over the face, tied gently, and she would have simply drifted away. Dr. Shepherd's conclusion, and it's a hypothesis, not a confirmed verdict, because the official cause of death remains unknown, was suffocation. Quiet, peaceful, probably unfelt. They believed that the people they offered to the mountains didn't die. They became messengers, intermediaries between the living world and the divine. Still present, still listening, still there on the mountain, just in a different form. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that she has managed to speak to us across 5 centuries, through chemistry, through CT scans, through the remarkable accident of physics that kept her perfectly frozen while the rest of the world changed completely around her. She went up that mountain to speak to the gods. She ended up speaking to us instead. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. This is the kind of story that deserves to be told slowly, carefully, with all its complexity intact, not just as a cool mummy fact, not just as a historical curiosity, but as a human story. A story about a civilization's deepest beliefs, about what it means to be chosen, about the relationship between sacrifice and meaning, about a 13-year-old girl who walked 1,000 miles and has now been studied, discussed, and cared for across 5 more centuries. She never got to grow up, but she never got to be forgotten either. The maiden of Lulailaku, still there, still perfect, still sleeping,